Hey, I've got another game review for you guys, and following the trend from the last video, I'm reviewing yet another game that's been on my radar for a while now. This time I'll be reviewing Forgive Me Father, which released back in 2022. At the time I remember being quite well received, but for some reason I never played it back then. Better late than never, right? Just a quick disclaimer, this video will exclusively be for the first game because I'm aware that there is a second game, but my review list is currently so exhaustive that I wasn't able to play it now because some of the other games currently being reviewed in the background are shaping up to be quite thorough videos, so I promise I'll get around to it eventually when the release schedule for new games is slower. Just quickly, please consider subscribing, I'd really appreciate it. Alright, let me get back on with this review and stop wasting your guys' time. Immediately upon starting the game, you're introduced to an interesting choice where you can choose your playstyle. You can either play as the priest, which is a more defensive and slow-paced setup, or you can play as the journalist, which revolves around a faster, more aggressive experience. I think we all know what I chose. The story starts and we're immediately made aware by our cousin that something's wrong. We don't know what, we don't understand why, all we know is that our presence is needed and we set out to pest this film, which, you know what, fair play for the banger town name. If you want to consider these monsters as pests, then it's a 10 out of 10 name, but it will never top Gungaga.
Me? Gungaga.
I refuse. Anyway, getting back on track with the game here, we arrive and there's something off about the hostel we visit. We don't meet our cousin here and, well, we should have, so what happened? And that's where our experience begins. When we finally get to control our character, we set off not only to find our cousin, but also figure out what on earth happened and how we can stop it. Also, shout out to my accuracy here, I was popping off. Let's first talk about the world here. I think it's quite decent. There's a little bit of storytelling on display and it's alright. Maybe I'm setting my standards too high, especially as this comes immediately after playing Chrono Trigger. You should check out that video if you haven't already. It's such a good game. Sorry, I'm just really all over the place today. A lot of the storytelling is kind of just done through the gameplay experience. There are only a few cutscenes and it's largely just as an indication that you finish in an area and are moving on, which I have no issues with. It does a decent job of keeping the player engaged and allows the bulk of the player's focus to be centered into what they're doing, because I think if the game went for periods of time without gunplay, then I think it would have dampened the experience. But thankfully that's not an issue here and it's pretty much full throttle action. There are some discoverable items throughout the game, they're appropriately labeled story to entice the player with detailed items or just supporting items that expand the story. I think this is actually a pretty neat way to work about storytelling and world building in a genre where there isn't that much emphasis on storytelling. It works so well as it allows the player to build the story at their own pace and allows the player to actively be engaged in combat, and between actions they can retrace their steps and see how much detail goes into the story and what you're experiencing. Speaking of the combat, let's talk about it. The gunplay in Spade is very fun. There are a nice range of weapons that are available to use, and unlocking each weapon felt fun, and being able to use them as you please, often rotating between weapons as you fight, was rewarding, as you understand that there isn't really a gun that makes all other guns obsolete and pushes the player to really mix and match. One of my favourite features was the use of the harpoon on the underwater level, and I'm spoiling it ever so slightly, but I thought that this level was so different from all the others that it was excellent. It broke the mold for level design up until this point and after, admittedly, but it was so refreshing to see and experience something different, even if it took me a few moments to understand why this level was even in the game, which is something that I have to deal with when I feel like the story isn't expansive enough throughout and I somewhat lose focus as to what the goal was here. Anyway, let me loop back around to the combat. There are abilities that are available for use which build up as you get more kills, which in itself is incredibly different from the traditional cooldowns in other games. These skills are quite diverse. I mean, you smoke herbs and get cursed by a magic sword. Like, that's so incredibly wacky, but it works incredibly well here. There were other abilities like the camera that stuns enemies and SIGs that slow the world around you while you move about and take advantage of the time manipulation to get off some hits and kill monsters. As a whole, I think these really help the combat experience. It allows the game to feel fresh, and as mentioned before, it really pushes the player to use as much of their tools available as possible. So, talking about the overall experience, the game is set through levels, which I thought worked here. I don't think it would have been as enjoyable if the areas were larger, more open linear maps, just because that would take away from the fast-paced nature of the game. The levels were quite diverse, with the environments constantly changing, having interactable items as mentioned before. What I did not mention before is that the environment can also benefit your experience. Barrels can be very useful in this game, especially when swarmed by large groups of enemies. It also allows you to play smarter and more adventurous. I found that enemy design was quite good and well varied. What I thought was really nice was that your experience becomes more challenging as the game progresses, although thankfully it's nothing unbearable or frustrating, just fights that make you focus and think about what you're doing. The bosses were also really good and offered their own challenges. There were unique mechanics tied to these bosses which were found at the end of each world. The sound design was really good. Weapons for the most part sounded different. Enemies were easily identifiable through their sounds. Even the skills and items you collected like ammo had sounds, which was fine. I didn't think about it too much in the moment, but going back through my footage footage, I think it actually helps slightly with immersion and engagement. Now, I will get this part out of the way. The music was really good. I was pleasantly surprised with how good it was. When I was first playing the game, I was unsure how the music would complement the world design. Would it contrast with the world design and gameplay feel, or would it be overpowering? And thankfully, I thought it worked great. There are a few moments where I was in the middle of fights and I was impressed with what I was hearing in the background. I think my favourite part of the game was the art style. I thought it was really unique and very fun to experience, especially early on. I will admit though, I thought the later part of the game, although interesting, did deviate from the good world and art design, and I was unsure how I felt about it, and I still am. Like, I thought the opening few areas were so well designed and complement the game wonderfully, but later areas just felt a bit too different, which isn't always a bad thing, but it ties itself up quite nicely. I did just want to briefly mention that there is an endless mode in the game, and I thought it provides additional replayability. As good as the story experience is, I think having this gameplay option makes it more diverse and allows you to freely enjoy the gunplay because it genuinely is really good. So with that, I can actually move into what I thought the game does well. Thankfully, there's actually quite a lot that it does well. The story is interesting, with the ending actually being really good. Like, I wasn't really expecting it. The fast-paced nature of the game is always appreciated, especially being a big fan of the Doom games. However, I do really appreciate the accessibility of the choice of having a slower paced experience if you aren't familiar with this type of game. The enemies were decent, and as mentioned just a minute ago, the music and art direction were really good. Oh, and I didn't cover it earlier, but the voice acting is alright. The performances on display were decent. There was some range and emotions displayed. One last thing, the madness gauge building up and causing you to deal more damage and receive less was a really neat touch. Now, unfortunately, I do have a few small complaints. Firstly, the sound could have been balanced just a little better. There are a few moments where it felt unbalanced, particularly with some of the louder sounds. As always, this isn't something that's detrimental, but it's something that I wanted to comment on just because I did notice it ever so slightly. Also, there are a few levels where I didn't understand the context behind the world design. They unfortunately felt separate from what the story is building towards, and I think that this was the only thing that really took away from the game being an exceptional experience. One more thing, although I did praise the madness gauge and its inclusion, the colour change visually made things a little awkward, especially in brighter areas. It makes things a little difficult to see, which was a shame because in darker areas it works so well and looked awesome. So overall, what do I think? Even with the small comments I just made, I do think the game is really good. It's a nice small game that offers plenty and holds its own very well. The game took me about 4.5 to 5 hours to play through, which felt about right for a game of this level. The attention to detail and wide range of customization was also appreciated. Leveling wasn't too harsh and made gunplay more dynamic. Would I recommend playing this game? Yeah, I think I would. I found it to be very fun and it was quite a unique experience. I'll eventually get around to reviewing the second game, but if you've already played it, please let me know how you found it. If it's received well enough, it may get bumped up my review list. Thank you as always for making it to the end of the video. I do appreciate you sticking around for so long. If you'd like, consider liking the video and maybe give me more games to review. Of course, you don't have to do this, but thank you anyway. Hope you all enjoy the video. I hope you all have a good day and I'll see you again for the next video.